years, by threat, kidnapping in San Jose, under 14 years, and kidnapping in San Jose, has arrested a 23-year-old citizen of Mexico, has arrested a 23-year-old citizen of Mexico convicted of predatory criminal sexual assault of a child. ICE Houston in Cook County, arrested a 64-year-old citizen of Honduras, convicted of murder in Los Angeles County, California. Convicted of murder in Los Angeles County, arrested a 49-year-old citizen of Guatemala, arrested a 49-year-old citizen of Guatemala, convicted of assault and arson in Prince Williams, Virginia. ICE Denver arrested a 36-year-old citizen of ICE Denver arrested a 36-year-old citizen of Mexico who is registered as a sex offender and has been convicted of sexual assault of a child in Lake County, Colorado. ICE Baltimore arrested a 50-year-old citizen of China convicted of sex trafficking in Bel Air, Maryland. And ICE Boston arrested a 46-year-old citizen of Jamaica convicted of 3 counts of rape of a child and 2 counts of indecent assault and battery of a child under 14 in Boston, Massachusetts. President Trump and our administration will not rest until every single violent illegal alien is removed from our country. The safety of the American people is too important to settle for anything less. On that note, the Democrat and media outrage over the deportation of Abrego Garcia, an MS-13 El Salvadorian illegal alien criminal who is hiding in Maryland, has been nothing short of despicable. Based on the sensationalism of many of the people in this room, you would think we deported a candidate for Father of the Year. That's because, unfortunately, many in this country care more about this quote-unquote Maryland father, a legal alien MS-13 gang member, than a Maryland mother and an American citizen who was brutally murdered at the hands of a different illegal alien. Of course, I am referring to Rachel Morin. And if you didn't see, yesterday, a Maryland jury found illegal alien Victor Antonio Martinez Hernandez guilty of murdering Rachel Morin in August of 2023. She was a 37-year-old mother of 5 who was jogging in an otherwise safe community northeast of Baltimore when this monster ambushed, strangled, and beat her to death before stuffing her brutalized body in a tunnel drain. The Morin family finally got justice yesterday, but they will never get Rachel back. Our hearts go out to Rachel's family, her 5 children, and her mother, Patty, who has suffered the unimaginable loss of her daughter. In case you missed it last week, President Trump signed a national security presidential memorandum directing federal agencies administering federal land on the border to make land available to the Defense Department in a new national defense area. This followed the president's Day 1 executive order committing his administration to marshal all available resources and authorities to stop the unprecedented flood of illegal aliens into our country and to obtain complete operational control of the borders of the United States of America. Once again, the president is fulfilling another key promise. This new national defense area spans more than 170 miles across our border in New Mexico, but in the coming weeks, this administration will add more than 90 miles in the state of Texas. This national defense area will enhance our ability to detect, interdict, and prosecute the illegal aliens, criminal gangs, and terrorists who were able to invade our country without consequence for the past 4 years under the Biden administration. It will also bolster our defenses against fentanyl and other dangerous narcotics that have been poisoning our communities. With all of this work being done to make America great again, we continue to see a positive response from the American public. A brand new poll published from the Daily Mail and JL Partners this morning found that President Trump's approval rating is at an all-time high. That's because the president is working tirelessly to keep his promises to the American people, as I just saw him doing today in the Oval Office. We have a reporter in our new media seat today, Matthew Foldy. I like your boots, Matt, who is the editor-in-chief of the Washington Reporter. Washington Reporter is a new, fast-growing outlet that breaks stories about legislation and interviews leaders in Congress and across the administration. The publication's readership includes the highest levels of business and government. And with that, please kick us off, Matt.
And we've interviewed you as well. So Caroline, thanks so much for having me here on behalf of our readership and the millions of Americans who I think appreciate what you're doing with the new media seat here and making this a more accessible briefing room. I'm curious with Harvard, we saw the Trump administration today announced it's cutting around $2 billion, or freezing $2 billion in funds to Harvard because the campus has serious problems with violence and with anti-Semitism. We saw President Obama, former President Obama, side with Harvard, which rejected the Trump administration's demands. I'm curious, where does the administration see this going with Harvard and with other colleges and universities in America that are refusing to reform in wake of the sort of craziness that we've seen take over some of them.
Thank you, Matt, for being here, and thanks for the question. When it comes to Harvard, the president's position on this is grounded in common sense, in the basic principle that Jewish American students, or students of any faith, should not be illegally harassed and targeted on our nation's college campuses. And we unfortunately saw that illegal discrimination take place on the campus of Harvard. There are countless examples to prove it, particularly with the stunning confession by then Harvard President Claudine Gay, who said that bullying and harassment depended on the context. The president at that time made it clear to the American public he was not going to tolerate illegal harassment and anti-Semitism taking place in violations of federal law. So the president made it clear to Harvard, follow federal law, no longer break Title VI, which was passed by Congress to ensure no student can be discriminated against on the basis of race, and you will receive federal funding. Unfortunately, Harvard has not taken the president or the administration's demands seriously. All the president is asking, don't break federal law, and then you can have your federal funding. I think the president is also begging a good question. More than $2 billion out the door to Harvard when they have a more than $50 billion endowment. Why are the American taxpayers subsidizing a university that has billions of dollars in the bank already? And we certainly should not be funding a place where such grave anti-Semitism exists.
And I'm curious, you had just mentioned Rachel Morin, and I'm a Maryland man, and I think most Marylanders appreciate what you were saying today. We've seen that Chris Van Hollen, who was Rachel Morin's senator, basically threatening to fly to El Salvador to press for the release of someone who was in America illegally. And not as much sort of from him about Rachel Morin's horrific murder and the verdict that was, I think, rightly reached yesterday. What does the administration think about the priorities we're seeing from Senate Democrats in terms of illegal immigrants instead of the work that agencies like ICE and DHS are doing with the Trump administration?
It's mind-boggling, the priorities of the modern-day Democrat Party. I think it's atrocious that you have Democrats in Congress on Capitol Hill who swear an oath to protect their constituents and to serve them in Washington, D.C., spending more time defending illegal immigrant gang members than their own constituents and law-abiding American citizens like Rachel Morin. And I saw the president personally on the campaign trail, and I continue to see him in his role as president of the United States, put American families first, reach out to the victims, the families of victims at the hands of illegal immigrant crime, and frankly, the actions and the words of the Democrat Party prove they could not care less about the American public. And maybe if they did, they'd see a bit higher approval ratings right now. Thanks for being here with us today. Peter.
Thank you, Caroline. To follow up on something that you just said, why do Ivy League schools get so much federal funding?
It's a very good question, and it's a question the president has obviously raised in his discussions and negotiations with not just Harvard, but also Columbia and many other Ivy League institutions. We have the Anti-Semitism Task Force, which the president promised and delivered on. The Anti-Semitism Task Forces across the government, representatives from various federal agencies who meet on a weekly basis to discuss the question that you just raised. And I think a lot of Americans are wondering why their tax dollars are going to these universities when they are not only indoctrinating our nation's students, but also allowing such egregious illegal behavior to occur.
To follow up on immigration, deporting American citizens to Central American prisons, is it legal, or do you need to change the law to do it?
Well, it's another question that the president has raised. It's a legal question that the president is looking into. And he talked about this yesterday when with his meeting with President Bukele in the Oval Office. He would only consider this, if legal, for Americans who are the most violent, egregious, repeat offenders of crime who nobody in this room wants living in their communities.
And then there's this CHNV thing. President Biden let more than 530,000 people from Cuba, Haiti, Nicaragua, Venezuela into the U.S. with this CHNV program. He did it with the stroke of a pen. And now a judge will not let President Trump undo it with the stroke of a pen. So are you guys going to give all 530,000 plus people individual deportation hearings, or are you just going to try to deport them?
I spoke to White House counsel's office about this morning because obviously another rogue district court judge is trying to block the administration's mass deportation efforts with this latest injunction. We will fight this in the court of law, and we will ensure that every individual who illegally entered our country and was really taken advantage of by the previous administration because they abused the parole system in this country to fast track legal status, as they said, for these illegal immigrants. And they completely abused our legal system. Many of these paroled individuals were then given temporary protective status, which the intention of that TPS was only supposed to be used in times of war or storm or destruction in the home countries of these migrants. It was completely abused. These migrants came here for economic reasons, and they illegally entered our country, and the president is not going to tolerate that. And so we will continue to focus on deporting as many individuals as we can. Jennifer.
One on tariffs and one on Russia. Can you give us any sort of an update on which deals are in hand or are close? Which countries are reaching a deal on tariffs? And then on Russia, can you give us an update on what the agreement was with Russia? The president yesterday said that he
Mexico, who is registered as a sex offender.
Can you talk a little bit about what Russia agreed to?
Sure. I don't want to get ahead of our United States Trade Ambassador and Secretary of Commerce, the Secretary of Treasury, all the great individuals who are working incredibly hard to cut these good trade deals. And the president's deeply involved in this as well. He has made it clear to his trade team he wants to personally sign off on all of these deals too. And so I don't want to get ahead of them on announcements, but obviously, as you've heard from numerous administration officials, there have been many talks with countries. We've had more than 15 deals, pieces of paper put on the table, proposals that are actively being considered. And as we've said consistently, more than 75 countries have reached out. So there's a lot of work to do. We very much understand that, but we do believe that we can announce some deals very soon.
And then on Russia, can you say, did Russia agree to anything with Special Envoy Steve Witkoff?
I don't want to get ahead of those negotiations as well. What I can tell you is that they were a productive conversation was had. As the presidential envoy Steve Witkoff said last night, he believes that Russia wants to end this war, and the president believes that as well. There is incentive for Russia to end this war, and perhaps that could be economic partnerships with the United States, but we need to see a ceasefire first, and the president and the presidential envoy Witkoff made that very clear to the Russians. Gabe.
Thank you, Caroline. And
yeah.
I also want to thank your press office for releasing that information that you cited up there regarding the ICE arrests over the last couple of days. And I have them right here, but what I might ask is, why not release the same information for those who were deported to us?
Yeah. Well, first of all, the information was released by the Department of Homeland Security. The individuals on the flights to El Salvador are foreign terrorists, and those are counter-terrorism operations. They are much different than the arrests and final order of removals that you see on a day-to-day basis that law enforcement agents. First of all, the information was released by the Department of Homeland Security. The individuals on the flights to El Salvador are foreign terrorists, and those are counter-terrorism operations. They are much different than the arrests and final order of convicted of see on a day-to-day basis that law enforcement agents. Two different things. Foreign terrorism, illegal immigrant, criminal, two different things, two different definitions. You should look them up. Christian, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Caroline. Does the president support raising the corporate tax rate to pay for all these other tax cuts he wants to see?
Convicted of see on a day-to-day basis. Look, I've seen this idea proposed. I've heard this idea discussed, but I don't do different things. Different definitions. You should look them up. Christian, go ahead.
And then secondly, do you have the information on the status of raising Alexander corporate tax rate to pay for all these other tax cuts he wants already?
Convicted of see on a day-to-day basis. Look, I've seen this idea proposed. I've heard this idea discussed, but I don't do different things. Different definitions. National Security Council. I have spoken to the president about Eden Alexander, and he's made it very clear to our national security team that finding these is a priority, but unfortunately I don't have any updates to share. But it's a very important matter. I've seen this idea proposed. I've heard this idea discussed, but I don't do different things. National Security Council. I have spoken to the president about Eden Alexander, and he's made it very clear to our national security team that finding these is a priority, but unfortunately I don't have any. We are compliant with but it's a very important matter. I've seen this idea proposed. I've heard this idea discussed, but I don't do different things. Within the council, I have spoken to the president about complying with the court's orders, and you have seen that, and the president made that clear yesterday in the Oval Office with President Bukele. Sure.
Thanks, Caroline. Could you, just going back to El Salvador, could you just explain to us a little bit more about the legal basis on which you may be able to send US citizens to prison there? I know you said that President Trump is looking at it, but can you explain to us a little bit more about how that might be possible?
We're looking at it, and when I have more for you to share, I certainly will. Sure.
Still going off the El Salvador questions, yesterday in the Oval Office, administration officials made it very clear that El Salvador is responsible for Mr. Abrego Garcia, yet El Salvador's president said we're not going to do anything with him. So my question is,
he's made it very clear to our national security team that President Bukele said that she is very important. I've seen this idea of post that I've heard donor release Abrego Garcia was a foreign terrorist.
You have seen
he
that?
is an
And,
MS-13 gang member. He was engaged in human
Office
trafficking.
Bukele.
He illegally came into our country.
Caroline.
And so
Could you, just going back to
deporting him back to El
could you just
Salvador
explain
was
to us a
always
little
going
bit
to be
more
the end
about
result.
the legal
There is
basis
never
on
going to be
which
a world in
you
which
may
this
be
is an
able to
individual
send
who's
US
going to live a
citizens
peaceful
to-
life
to
in
prison
Maryland
there?
because he is a
I know
foreign
you said that
terrorist
President Trump
and
is
an
looking at it, but can you
MS-13 gang
explain
member.
to us a
Not
little
only
more about how
have
that
we
might be
confirmed
possible
that,
in
President
your-
Bukele
and when I have
yesterday in
more
the
for
Oval
you to
Office
share, I certainly
confirmed
will.
that as well. So he went back to his home
Still
country
going off
where he
the
will
El
face
Salvador
consequences
questions,
for his
yesterday
gang
in the Oval
affiliation
Office,
and his engagement in
administration
human
officials made it
trafficking.
very
I'm not sure
clear
what
that
is so
El Salvador
difficult
is responsible
about this
for
for
Mr.
everyone in the
Garcia,
media to
yet El
understand.
Salvador's
And it's
president said
appalling,
we're not
truly
gonna do anything
appalling,
with him.
that there
So
has
my
been so much time covering this alleged human trafficker and this gang member, MS-13 gang member. It's truly striking to me. Karen.
Thanks, Caroline. The president was posting on Truth Social today about helping American farmers. And last week in his cabinet meeting, he was talking about a plan to work with farmers to retain workers who are in the U.S. illegally, provided that they leave and then come back through what he said would be a legal process. Can you give details on what that would look like, how many workers he's talking about, how long a plan like that would take to implement, and the timeline for more details on getting this actually to implementation?
I can check in with our immigration and our policy team and get you some more details on that, Karen.
And is this something he wants to roll out soon? I mean, he was talking back and forth with Secretary Rollins.
Right.
This is kind of imminent that he wants to do this.
Yeah, look, the president is in constant communication with all of his cabinet secretaries, particularly Secretary Rollins, who has the backs of American farmers and ranchers. It's something that he spoke about with her in the front of all the cameras in the cabinet room, but I'll check in with not only our immigration team, but also with USDA, and we'll get you an answer. Jonathan.
Hi, Caroline.
Hi, it's great to see you in here.
You too. The president has long said that it would be an abuse of power for a president to direct prosecutors to investigate him. Last week, President Trump explicitly directed the Justice Department to scrutinize Chris Krebs to see if it can find any evidence of criminal wrongdoing. How is that not an abuse of power to direct the Justice Department to look into an individual, a named individual?
Look, the president signed that executive order. It's the position of the president in this White House that it's well within his authority to do it. Otherwise, he wouldn't have signed it. And he signed it, and that's his policy. Jeff, how you doing?
Fine, thanks, Caroline. A follow-up on Harvard. The president floated on Truth Social, I believe, the possibility of removing tax-exempt status. How serious is that threat, and are there other universities he's considering? And then a follow-up question on foreign policy. Can you give us an update on what the president hopes to come from the next round of talks with Iran?
Sure. First, when it comes to Harvard, as I said, the president has been quite clear they must follow federal law. He also wants to see Harvard apologize, and Harvard should apologize for the egregious anti-Semitism that took place on their college campus against Jewish American students. First, when it comes to professors, who's been quite clear, said that follow federal law. He had engaged in discriminatory behavior against Jewish students. Of course, you had the former president of the university saying bullying harassment depends on their college campus against you also had first when it comes to professors that we all saw play out said that for the cameras he had engaged in discriminatory behavior against Jewish students. Of course, you had the president of the university saying bullying harassment depends on their college campus against you also had first when it comes to professors that we all saw play out said that for the cameras he had engaged in discriminatory behavior against Jewish students. Of course, you had the president of the university saying bullying harassment depends on their college campus against you also had President made Ferdinand Professor that we all saw play out, said that he cameras he had engaged in never being able to engage in their course. I do want to answer President including the saying Maxim congratulations on their contest, but you also had Ferdinand Professor that we all saw play out, said that he cameras he had engaged in never being able to engage in their course. And President including the saying Maxim congratulations on their contest. 2 years also had Ferdinand Professor that we all saw play out, said that he cameras he had engaged in never being able to engage in their course. And President including the saying Maxim congratulations on their contest. 2 years also had Ferdinand Professor that we all saw play out, said that he cameras he had engaged in never being able to engage in their course. And President including the saying Maxim congratulations on their contest. 2 years also had Ferdinand Professor that we all saw play out, said that he cameras he had engaged in never being able to engage in their course. And President including the saying Maxim congratulations on their contest. 2 years also had Ferdinand Professor that we all saw play out, said that he cameras he had engaged in never being able to engage in their course. And President including the saying Maxim congratulations on their contest. 2 years also had Ferdinand Professor that we all saw play out, said that he cameras he had engaged in never being able to engage in their course. And definitely want to get President including the saying Maxim congratulations on their contest. 2 years also had Ferdinand Professor that we all saw play out, said that he cameras he had engaged in never being able to engage in their course. And definitely want to get President including the saying Maxim congratulations on their contest. 2 years also had Ferdinand Professor that we all saw play out, said that he cameras he had engaged in never being able to engage in their course. And definitely want to get President including the saying Maxim congratulations on their contest. 2 years also had Ferdinand Professor that we all saw play out, said that he cameras he had engaged in never being able to engage in their course. And definitely want to get President including the saying Maxim congratulations on their contest. 2 years also had Ferdinand Dr.